We're ready to go. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Lucas Betch. I am Assistant Director and Career Coach in Experience and Professional Development. And I'm really excited to have this first shot talking about career readiness and featuring some of our fantastic faculty partners. Hello. Is it Matt?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. But as we get going, and before we get to our panel, definitely want to spend as much time with our panel. Hopefully, King is on his way. But just want to kind of outline a few different things regarding XPD and kind of our topic here. One is, what is XPD? Of course, it's the Career Services Office. And particularly with our mission to supporting students with their, to really empower them towards their goals, their aspirations, and looking at really translating their liberal arts experience to their personal and professional lives. We're all helping them explore, do, reflect, and connect throughout that process. And then just a little bit into our agenda. I do want to keep this brief, but certainly I do want to be talking about our goals. What I'm really hoping you guys take away and really starting this conversation. Certainly spending the vast majority of time with our lovely panelists here. And three, some really exciting things in the works that I'm hoping to share at the end of our time. So I'll be featuring that at the very end. So really goal number one is I'm hoping that, whether you're faculty, staff, get you all thinking about one strategy that you could possibly embed career development into, whether into your classroom, into your advising, into your work with students. I'm really featuring, focusing on equity. It's a huge equity piece of supporting students, especially we're talking about career readiness to field their education. Second goal is to think about considering what XPD and faculty and just overall collaboration that you can emphasize inclusion and career readiness. And three, just hopefully you'll have informal time discussion. I definitely want this to be, again, less about me talking and more interaction, questions, things like that. Kind of a think tank of thinking about different new approaches that really empower students, especially with the lens on equity, with underserved backgrounds, and thinking about how we can help students thrive in their career journeys. Alrighty, and then lastly, just thinking about this term career readiness. It's thrown around a lot. It's in the goals, it's in the title. What is career readiness? So career readiness, as defined by the National Association of Colleges and Employers, is really that foundational piece that students demonstrate particular skills that broadly prepare them towards their place in the workplace and even beyond that with their lifelong career journey. So really focusing on those skills. You see a document in the middle of your table with a bunch of skills on them, and it's really, that's a huge piece about celebrating those fantastic skills and competencies that students are developing in the classroom and outside the classroom. Alright, trying to make this brief. Alright, so we'll jump right into our panelists here, and I'll just have each one of our lovely panelists do a brief introduction. So Alicia, Jonathan, you guys could fight over it, wants to go first.
I'll go first. So I'm Alicia Peterson. I am in chemistry.
Perfect.
And I'm Jonathan Merritt Nash. I teach in the history department.
Awesome. And hopefully King gets here at some point. Otherwise, we'll just have these two lovely folks. As we transition to the panel questions, really I want to start very broadly. Definitely want to get into talking about your specific things that you do in your classroom and in departments. But just starting broadly, thinking about, you know, the career development you've integrated into your classroom and teaching, what kind of inspired you to really feature some of the you know, career development in your spaces that you work in?
So for me, I was a first-gen college student, and I liked math and science, and I was like, well, I don't want to be a doctor. I guess I have to teach high school. That's the only thing I thought was possible. I was wrong. There's a lot of opportunities. One of my professors invited me to do research. That was life-changing for me. I changed my major a little bit a couple times, and just realizing that that was okay, and that's something that I didn't realize until I talked with my professors, but I sought that out. And I just think making sure all of our students are aware of all these different opportunities and those other things. So that summer research, I was like, wait, you're gonna pay me to build my resume? I didn't know that that was an opportunity. You get paid to go to graduate school in chemistry and other areas of science, which I wouldn't have known if I hadn't interacted with professors. And so we try to, in chemistry, we have 2 different courses. So we have an intro to STEM course, which is for our women in STEM scholars. And so that course is 0 to 1 credits, and it's just where we talk about these things. They build a resume, right? And so it's just essentially partnering with XPD, but also with chemistry, we also have all of our majors have to take a course where they do these kind of things. So we kind of have it built into the curriculum.
And like,
I
yeah.
I just want to follow up on that. So
Yeah, please.
these courses you're talking about, is this basically kind of introducing students to the hidden curriculum?
Kind of. I wouldn't say hidden curriculum, just everything. So this is where it's like, these are opportunities available for you, things where you can get paid to do research, writing your resume, so you're getting feedback, why do you need a resume, what's the difference between a cover letter and a personal statement, we talk about those. Exploring different career opportunities, so you know there's a variety of different things.
So it's kind of bringing things that one would traditionally expect to be done in, say, academic or career advising.
Yes.
And you've identified the specific things relevant for your students, and you introduce them through a 0
Through the class,
credit
yep,
course.
it's a 0 or 1 credit course. And it's, so that one is set up through the Women in STEM Scholars program too. So, right, because it's 0 or 1 credits. It's also pass-fail, so but it's informal,
Right.
so they can kind of ask questions. We kind of lower that barrier too. So we talk 4-year planning. What does that mean? A little more in depth too in there. So some of that more hidden things.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Alluding to a lot of great stuff in terms of department and classes that we'll certainly dive into more. But what about you, Jonathan? What inspired you to try to do all the great things that we've worked together doing and cool things that you've done in your classes?
Yeah, I mean, like Alicia, where I was the first in my family to graduate from college. And I remember when I told my father that I was going to major in history, he said, well, what would you do with it? You know, and I don't know. I didn't at the time, so I double majored in economics because then it would be a lot easier to talk about what you were going to do. So now I think like I don't want to prepare students to be me. I mean, because to be honest, there are no history professor jobs. So it's like, why do that? But I still think my subject is worth studying. Right, so I want to help my students be able to develop a vocabulary where they would be able to answer a question like my father asked me, like, why study history? You know, like, we're not paying, $50,000 a year for you to study this without understanding how that could translate into a job, right? And so depending on the classes, like in history, we have a bunch of different touch points with XPD in our major courses, and then for me, since I have to teach a cultural social difference identity class for first year students, and many of them don't even choose the class, right, like in their first semester, so that in that class I start having conversations and dedicate days to help my students see the value of general ed courses outside of their intended major, and how that can position them to potentially be successful for pursuing internships or later on jobs, and see these gen ed courses that they see themselves as being forced to take as like an added value to the major. as opposed to something that's a distraction from the major. But I can totally get into specifics once we get rolling.
Awesome. So both of you mentioned, obviously alluded to things in specific classes, but just start with your departments. Is there anything particular within your departments you try to structure in with career development, exploration, anything like that throughout the department's curriculum?
We have to go which way?
Yeah.
You can go first.
So in the history department, right now we have 3 required courses for the major. One is, we call it the history colloquium. So traditionally that would be taken by students in their sophomore year if they're majors. But then we also have minors in the class who, as you might know, sometimes students discover a minor like towards the end of their time here. So we have older, like juniors, seniors also in it who are minors. But in that class, we always like to do an alumni panel, whether that's a connection with like Connections, what was it, Expo? Or if it's a specific visit, say like in the spring semester when alums will come on Zoom. And the reason why we do that is we want the students to be able to see sort of what Alicia was alluding to, the vast variety of potential career paths for a history major. So when I work with Lucas, I always say, like, give me somebody who's in business or something that students wouldn't think about. And then we have students who are interested in libraries or museums, so somebody in that. Likewise, we have students interested in law, and then maybe some wild card type of deal. And then that way, the students in the class are able to see the variety of career paths, begin to start thinking through how they can follow up with the panelists, because I'll always invite the students to write thank you notes to the panelists, and we'll do that as a group thing, but then hopefully that could be an end or like an opening for a student to follow up with networking. And also in that class that's at the 200 level, we have students do an informational interview in which they pick an alum who's a history major and talk with the person about how they, just do the basics of informational interview, how they got to the spot where they're at, so on. And then again, I'm the one who will always build into that assignment the thank you note, because I think you can go far networking if you're polite and follow up on things and smile and say thank you. And then in our next sequence class that's for primarily juniors, we'll have them work on a resume that they could potentially move towards the job application stage. And I should say at the 200 level with the informational interviews, one of our goals is to get the students to ask about potential internships, so on, for that like sophomore summer and potentially junior summer. But at that second class, it's the resume for hopefully a job search, right? Because students will typically take that now in the fall of their senior year. And then for the capstone class, we'll also build in some career sort of connections, but it's almost at that point, I'm sort of the opinion, like the spring of the senior year, it could almost be too late. So it's more trying to do some tinkering with resume or do some tinkering with informational interviews for students who might not be comfortable with what that next step might be. So at that final class, you have some students who might have a job, others who might be planning on going to graduate school, and others who might not know what will happen. And so it has to be a little bit more tailored individually, I think. So that's what we do in the major for us, to provide our students with at least a sense of a somewhat coherent path, if not a coherent path, something that's like a path to a career. And then the hope would be that they would be able to sort of articulate the value of their degree to their parents, to their friends, and of course potential employers.
What's the curriculum, the history curriculum in the 200 level colloquium?
So in that class, it's topic based, so an instructor would pick whatever topic they want, but it's primarily focused on developing the skills of a historian and working really intently with and strongly with primary sources. And so that would be the other thing that we would do with when we do have, like when the Connections Expo used to be in the fall, we would have the students try to translate the historian skills and what we do to people who aren't historians, so that they would understand how sort of like close reading could be of use, or the value of clear verbal communication or written communication would be of value to a potential employer, or likewise assessing conflicting points of view, or sort of just taking what we see as the nuts and bolts of our discipline, but then trying to get students to practice explaining that to somebody outside the discipline who might not think the discipline has anything to offer to their workplace, like to these recruiters. Type of deal.
Anything to add, Alicia, with the?
So I was just gonna say, in chemistry, we do all those different things, but we actually have a course for majors. And it also has ethics in there too, so the chemistry department is externally accredited, and we have to have certain ethics topics in there for our external accrediting. American Chemical Society accredits our degree. So there's ethics in there too, but then also where they have to do interview an alum, they can find that in the thing. They write a resume. They do a personal statement. So personal statement's a big thing for graduate schools or pre-health professions. And so they work through those things. And that class, anywhere sophomores up to seniors actually end up taking it. So we try to get sophomores in there, but sometimes it's juniors just because of scheduling. But that one is 1 credit, and it is for a letter grade, but it's just a 1 credit course, so we can fit it in. And they meet, but we have alum panels come and meet with that. But then when we have those alumni panels, we open it up and we advertise to everybody, all the students that are listed as chemistry or biochemistry majors. So then anybody could come into the alumni panels, and a variety of people. We try to get a variety of people to come back to you, just like Jonathan was saying. So from different careers, not just ones you would traditionally think of. We also have a seminar series throughout the year that we invite all of our students to go to different seminars. We just had a woman from UMD talking about microplastics in the Lake Superior environmental chemistry and how they're really bad. So anyway, so we invite that and we kind of open that up for everybody, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that was a career option. So that's how we do it too.
Well, I would just sort of follow up on what Alicia was mentioning. When I started doing this about like 12 years ago, because I was assigned by my department chair to be the connection point with career services at the time, and then now XPD, we would try to do stuff outside of class, like seminars or alumni panels, and then we would just fail miserably, where we would have more panelists or more faculty than students. So then that's why we moved to put everything in the classes. But as Alicia said, and I should have mentioned, like when one of our majors classes would have an alum panel, we'll invite all the students who are listed as interested in the history major or minor, just so it's a big tent. But then we find that if it's targeted in a class, at least we know we can have 20 students there, so it doesn't feel as if we're wasting our alums' time or people in XPD's time organizing it, or even we would have folks come to film it too, and it's like you feel like you're just spinning your wheels and wasting time. So by embedding it in the course, we know the students are going to get it, and we don't have to worry about schedule conflicts for them.
Yes, I agree completely. That helped tons for us too, with this scheduled in at a set time. And then they talk with each other, right? Other ones that aren't in the class too. I mean, you hear them talking about it in class. So some are in the class now and some aren't. And then they're like, oh, that was really cool. They're like, oh, right, I should have, so they, maybe we'll go next time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Awesome, you guys mentioned so many great things. I'd love to go off on more in terms of scaffolding, career development, featuring alumni, and then like guaranteed attendance too. But I'll mention more of that later towards the end. So we'll just continue on. So doing some great things in the department, and then can you mention the things that you're specifically doing in your course in terms of in the classes that you teach? What are some specific assignments or projects that you try to interweave either career development or particular skills with students?
So, we have specific, they write a resume, and then they have to take that resume, and we have some sample ones, and then they take that resume and they have to meet with XPD. They get points for meeting with XPD too, setting up that appointment with XPD. XPD gives them a feedback, and then they turn in an updated draft. And it's a draft of a resume, and we talk about that and how to modify it, but at least then they have a sample resume. We also have a similar thing with their personal statement. They start that, and again, then they have to go with that one, they have to go to the writing center and get feedback from the writing center, and so they get points for going for that critique and talking with someone else, and then they turn in a polished draft. After that, we also have, just in general, so Laura's coming next week, to XPD, so this class that I have right now, it's all first years, so they do True Motives. I don't know if you've done the True Motives with
True Motivate.
Yeah.
True Motivate.
Assessment.
Sorry, True Motivate. And so they were working on that today, and so that's kind of, yes, you think this, but what are some other options, or what are things to look for in potential career things? We have some assignments built in where they just have to reflect on exploring different possible careers, just so they can look that up, kind of helping with telling, what am I going to do with my degree? It's a little, right, like people can predict, well, scientists, I know what a scientist does, or you just say, oh, I'm going to be an engineer, because people know what an engineer is when we talk about a lot of, what is an actuary, what do they do? So we kind of talk about different things.
Yeah, and at least for my classes, it always depends on where the students are, right? So, for instance, when I teach the cultural social difference identity class that we know it's first year students, Lucas will come and give a brief overview of a resume, because I want them to transition from whatever high school resume they may have had or maybe didn't have to something that's more of a college level resume where they're at now, right? So Lucas will come and provide the overview, help them brainstorm sort of like the action verbs and so on, and then think broadly about skills development, right? Like, it's not just previous jobs that would help develop the skills, but what you do in the classroom, maybe your work in clubs, so on, right? And then, like Alicia said, well, I'll have the students make a draft resume, go to XPD, have a career coach, or a student employee there critique it, and then instead of having the students actually revise it for me, because I really don't, to be honest, I don't care, right? I just want them to know that XPD exists in their first semester, second semester, work towards developing a college level resume. But then what I'm interested in is I'll have them at the end write a reflection of a couple paragraphs about some targeted questions where, how did you develop this resume? How does it differ from your high school resume? Or if it does, or maybe it doesn't, right? Tell me about the steps you took to make a meeting with XPD, or then after somebody critiqued your resume, what did that feel like? Do you think you're going to make any revisions, so on? And just sort of like metacognitive questions to get them to think about this process, right? So I do that at the 100 level. That intro to the major class, for there it's a very scaffolded informational interview assignment in which Lucas will visit, get students thinking about how to do the informational interview, think about how to write sort of a cold email to somebody, or a LinkedIn contact message or something. And then I'll have the students use the different resources that Lucas presents to them to find alums, and pick a couple to say like, all right, pick a couple, then explain to me why'd you pick them, and then write the cold emails to ask for the time, and then do it. And I let them do it on Zoom if they want, phone call if they want, or in person. And then afterwards, they have to do, again, a reflection about, how was it to get in contact with the person? What did you learn during the informational interview? Do you still want to pursue that career or not, right? And pretty much come up with questions that will get the students to think about what happened. And then when they submit that, they also have to submit a screenshot, say, of an email thank you note or a photograph of a print thank you note. And then once we get all that back, we'll just spend an entire day to debrief about the experience and then try to strategize for some of the students if they want to pursue that contact a little bit further of how they would do it, how maybe they could ask for an internship or learn about internship possibilities, stuff like that. And then in that junior level class, we do the same sort of resume, like nuts and bolts as I mentioned for the 100 level class, except it's a little bit higher level of thinking through a resume for a potential job or so on. So it follows a similar pattern, but you just are dealing with a different group. Well, you're working with a different group of students who already know what a resume is, so, and already know what a college level resume is, so we adjust that. And then I haven't really taught our thesis class except for during the horrible time in the block, so I won't really talk about that. But then I'm also teaching this integration 300 class, and like those of you who have taught it know it could be all over the place, and who knows, right? Like, I mean, it's a great class, I like it. But what I decided to do with it is, after just chatting with folks in instructional technology and Lucas, trying to brainstorm one of my seeds of an idea, we ended up creating a project in which students will first work with Lucas to understand how to reach out to alumni and understand sort of what an informational interview is. And then I work with Josh Ackerman from Instructional Technology and Annie Larson from the libraries to have the students make 7 to 8 minute videos that will feature 1 or 2 alumni. And the students can choose the alumni however they want, whether it's like you have a group of a couple accounting majors and they want to interview an accountant, which is fine. I mean, sometimes accountants are interesting. Or you have history and English students who will start off and say, like, hey, I'm a history student, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the other person will say, well, I'm an English student, I don't know either, let's find somebody. And then they just find people who majored in history and English who are doing just fun things. And so I'll have the students ask the alums about sort of the themes of the class, right? Like the value of the liberal arts, how they got to their career spot, how they see themselves, pursuing the common good in their career or in their personal lives. And so I like the assignment because it gets the students to do the sort of career readiness aspects that Lucas mentioned earlier, but then I think it also helps them develop some potential career skills of doing all the planning for the project and managing that so they meet all the deadlines well, and being able to film, whether it's on their phone or with cameras. They'll learn how to use Final Cut Pro to be able to do some editing. And then the great thing is for the class, we can just show them all in class, and we have, for lack of a better term, like an archive that they could draw upon when they write their integrative knowledge essays from alums that they just generate themselves. So I guess my long story is I think about the assignments and stuff based on who's in the class, right? And try to pitch it at the level that would benefit the students the most.
And I just want to add to it, thinking about that with the informational interview, like teaching them, so we have that where they have to interview an alum, but then that still comes back. We've had students where they want to get a job at Medtronic or Boston Scientific, and they just meet with somebody and they're like, oh, coffee, meet and talk, what do you do, right? Because it's very different than being in college. And that has turned into jobs, and actually more than one student I can list in the last 5 years where that turned into an internship that the company was like, well, we actually have an internship, and then they kept them. That's like a long-term job. They got their job, and just from that, well, I just want to find out what it's like to work here. So, but it's also been like, well, I know a friend who does great networking, so not just with alums, but other people.
So Jonathan, in the 200 colloquium, and then you mentioned a course for senior and juniors, like, are those all history students you've got there, or are you having students who are taking those classes for other credit purposes also going through this process?
Well, that's a great question, right? Because it depends on who teaches the class sometimes. But we're, like, the size of our program, we can't have a wall on the class to just restrict it to majors where it won't run. So for instance, the 200 class I teach this semester, we have 18 students, and I would say probably 5 of them are majors, 10 are minors, and then 3 are just interested in the class.
And so how do you find that the ones who are in the class taking it for reasons other than being majors or minors respond to these projects that are designed for majors and minors?
I haven't heard any complaints about it, because I think they'll see where it seems as if when we debrief from the informational interview, everyone finds it of value who does it. And then with having the alumni panel, no one complains about it. And I think particularly for the students who aren't majors or minors, who might just be interested, it seems to open their eyes, like, oh, well, I could potentially study this subject that I'm interested in, and it could turn out like to be a job and not, well, like lead to a job and not just be seen as a hobby or a waste of time, right? So I think it's kind of, it seems to me to be eye-opening and to work, and I haven't received any pushback about it.
Yeah, the informational interviews and alum panelists, across a lot of what alums are saying, that we've been in panels and connected with alums, it's very similar across any major, or a lot of careers too. So there's a very much common message and skills too that students are practicing not only when they're a student here and that are going to follow them long after they're done here. So great ways to integrate. Yeah, Ethan.
Have you found a way, especially given the 2 majors, to balance that out with the students who have grad school aspirations or are hoping to, instead of necessarily step immediately into a career, but look at grad school or look at doctorate programs and things like that? How do you balance that out when your audience might be quite different as far as their motivations after they graduate?
Yeah, so we have, small number of students who want to pursue an advanced degree, like in history, whether it's just the basic MA or PhD, or something targeted to museum studies or library studies. And so for the students that are targeted for the museum studies, library studies, they'll do fine with our alumni panels, because we always will have at least one person in those fields. And as instructors, we can connect those students. For the graduate school part, we used to do a panel just for graduate school, but then we sort of lost it because we didn't attach it to a class, and so fewer and fewer students would come for it. So we don't, I would say, like, we don't do a very good job other than individual advising conversations about potential sort of joys of going to graduate school, and then potential heartbreaks that could come as well. Particularly for the students who want to become a professor, I guess. But one of the things, though, we would always say, at least for history, I think, and I don't know if it's the same with chemistry, is we want to try to get our students in a position where they realize the sort of like a cost benefits of going, and then be sure that they hopefully will have some funding to go. And at least in history, MA programs are often like a sort of cash cow or a revenue generator for grad schools, and often lead to dead ends. So we'll have serious sort of like individual conversations at that level.
How about for chemistry?
So chemistry's a little different,
Yeah.
which makes sense, I guess. So about a third of our students go to grad school. And a third of our students are pre-health in some way, and then about a third go out and just use their bachelor's degree in a variety of different ways. And so we have always kind of geared towards all of those things. But within, for chemistry grad school, right, you need that personal statement, you need other things. So no matter what you're gonna do, and you can, if you're applying for a job, you can tailor your personal statement and make it a cover letter instead, right? And so we kind of talk about those things, so those are helpful no matter what. But I think just the general career exploring, do I need to get that higher level degree for the job I want? What is it gonna look like? What's the difference if you're working at a big company like 3M? What's the difference in those levels? And so they kind of explore that a little more. The other difference is you get paid to go to graduate school in chemistry and biochemistry, so we talk about that as a possibility, and so that kind of changes things greatly too. But with the career panelists, so whenever we have speakers come in, we have speakers that are not only alum, but also speakers like graduate programs are recruiting, right? So they'll come and we link it to a class to get people there. So then they can see kind of those opportunities for graduate school too. So we kind of have a little bit of both.
And I forgot the one other graduate school sort of feeder we have is law school as well. And so we'll have one of our faculty members is a designated pre-law advisor, but then that faculty member will work closely with history majors who are interested in law, but then we mostly sort of outsource it to XPD or sort of the collective pre-law advisor group that's on campus.
And every once in a while we overlap. We just had a patent love. Patent love's big.
Awesome. You guys mentioned so many awesome things, what you're doing in the classroom with students who, they're geared, like they have to be there. I mean, unlike waiting for us in XPD for students to show up and really incentivizing them to, with points on assignments and things like that, to do those things, therefore actually do them and build those skills. You guys mentioned working with, featuring alumni and informational interviewing. Curious either within your departments or, I don't know, Alicia, you mentioned bringing grad programs or employers to you might mention, but what does that process look like? How have you incorporated employers or grad programs into your classroom or department, and what does that kind of process look like?
So we have seminar series, we'll call it seminar series. We have a couple seminar speakers come in every semester, and someone coordinates that in our department. And we always try to bring in, so it always ends up being a couple alums that are more local, and then a couple people in industry, and then graduate programs. We have some money from a donor that had donated money, so we have a little bit of money for transportation to pay for people if they're coming from a ways away, but not, we can only do like one-ish a year for that. So that's why the graduate programs, because they pay their faculty to come and present here, so we don't have to pay for that. So it's externally funded for that because it's a recruiting thing for them. But we have alums coming in, and so we try to have it at a time where a lot of people can come, but then it works better for attendance and other things too, to tie it with other courses if possible. So we'll tie it with, so I'm teaching a environmental water and chemistry course right now, looking at different things, and so the speaker that was here last week tied right into the topic in class, and so we try to do those kind of things. But we get solicited to bring people in, but if we're looking for alums, we've worked with XPD to try to find different alums, right? We are in contact with some, but to try to get more of a variety.
Yeah. And in history, we don't really have sort of targeted employers who will reach out and say, hey, we want a history major, where maybe someday we will. But like we want to make sure our students are aware of career fairs that are going around. Likewise, when law schools visit or graduate schools might visit, we want to know our students. Well, we want our students to be aware of that. So I guess we're a little bit less targeted in a way. So one of the things the history department's been trying to do over the past maybe 4 years is to try to create a society that they named the Tegeter-Berg Society, like after Vincent Tegeter, who was a history professor, and Carol Berg, who was a history professor, and they're both monastics. And so like the goal of that society, and there'll be an event in early March at the Hennepin History Museum, and we try to do like one event each year, maybe sometimes 2 events. But the goal of the society is to bring together our alumni who might be in the Twin Cities area with current students. So we'll get a bus for them and try to lean on students in our majors classes to go, perhaps incentivize it with small bonus points. People like little bonus points even though they might not make much of a difference in the scheme of things, but if it doesn't sound cool enough to be able to go with your friends and talk to alums and visit Minneapolis or something. So we'll give them little bonus points, but then we also invite prospective students who claim that they're interested in history, and so we'll invite them and their parents. And so we've had good crowds, and we'll always have, so this year Shannon Smith and Brittany Merritt Nash are going to talk about racial covenants in Stearns County, and so we have folks registering for it. And so the hope is that we bring those 3 groups of people together, and we provide our students with a little networking advice before the trip, that then students will be able to hopefully mingle with alumni, and maybe something will come out of the conversations. And then at the same time, hopefully get prospective students to chat with current students about good things at our campuses, but then also help their parents, who we also invite, see that, oh, here's alums who have graduated with a history degree and they're doing well for themselves. But we don't really have any hard data to understand if this is recruiting students. It seems to be retaining students in our major, where we don't have too many leaks out of it. And the alums, as Lucas was saying, the alumni just love it, because they're like visiting with their old professors, meeting current students, learning a little bit about history. So we do that, but it's, as you can tell as I'm explaining it, it's a big lift for some of the folks in our department. But we partner with institution or the alumni and alumni associations, and so they'll help us out a little bit by doing all the communication and helping with some of the funding for the event. But it's a lot of work, but then when it turns out well, it feels good.
Do you find that like it's increased in attendance, right? Because I just picture like students are like, oh, I went as a student, that was right, and then they want to come back. Have you done that?
Over the
that
last,
seems like a great idea.
Yeah, like over the last 3 years, where I remember a few years ago we were at a place called like Kieran's Kitchen, which is sort of where by like Diane's places in Minneapolis, and we had a decent showing. It was not overwhelming. But then last year we partnered with the McCarthy Center, and so by the power of sort of the McCarthy Center and the history department together, it was a great showing. And then this year our venue's kind of small, where we have, I think it can only hold a little over 50 people, but our invitation went out I think last week, and we're getting really, really close to the maximum amount.
Mm-hmm.
So it's building, but it takes a lot of work for my colleagues who are involved in the organization.
Can imagine.
a lot of different ways. I just incorporating career development, partnerships and collaboration, whether it's alumni, grad schools, programs, different ways to do that. The common theme is collaboration and partnership, and yeah, some of these things do take a lot of work, and you're not necessarily all doing it by yourself either. For sake of time, probably one more question from me, and then I want to hit on something before final open up with questions and things, and please, if you do have them, keep them coming. As you kind of think about advice or things that you would want, colleagues to know, different ways that you've incorporated, what advice would you give in terms of trying to incorporate these things, or perhaps maybe it doesn't have to exactly look like what you or what your departments are doing, but anything that you would give as advice?
Well, I would say it's awesome to work with XPD. I mean, I was like, wait, we don't have to do that, right? We want to do these things, and they just have all these things already built in. Can't, like, all the modules, all the things set up, how to write a resume. It's like how to, like, just step by step, and so it's not a ton of time commitment from me at all to add in these things. And then I don't have to critique all their resumes. I send them to XTB, right? Like, and it works great because then they're going there and they're interacting with XPD. I mean, hopefully they find other things that they can maybe use later from XPD too. But so just a small assignment like that where it's not a lot of work on my end or even time commitment, but I think they get a lot out of it. And even if it's not as first years, but then like students come back later and like in advising meetings or other things, and they're like, oh, I met with Laura again, right? And so they kind of develop that relationship too with XPD, and so I think it doesn't take a lot of time, but.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the collaboration part I think is key. Don't feel as if you have to do it all by yourself, or your department has to do it all by themselves, because XPD's resources, they have tons of them. I like that I feel comfortable enough where if I'm an inkling of an idea that I don't know where it will go, I can shoot ideas off of colleagues in XPD to try to help me develop it better, because look at well, obviously I'm not an expert on careers, right? Like I had one job before this job. So I actually feel like I'm learning as well. So when the time comes and I might have to look for another job, I will be able to transition, hopefully. Maybe, or maybe not, but at least I'll know what not to do, I guess. So I do that, and then the other thing I would say is like start early, really. And what I mean by that is like early for our students, right? I think like first semester of first year is the time to start for career stuff, particularly if you're teaching 100 level classes. Think about, is there like a day, like I love my subject, so I don't like to give up any content, right? But think about a day. Is there a day that I could maybe devote to this, or another day just to get students to see the potential possibilities at our schools, and what they could major in, understand the resources that are on campus and how to access them, and then maybe even if students find joy in your discipline, to give them a little courage to potentially pursue it further and know that they can do something in it other than, say, in my case, become a historian or a professor. So I would, and then the other thing, like in the majors, what we did, and I don't know where it is on the website now that it got redesigned, but we did have a checklist of like stepstones for what we think students should do career-wise in like the first year, second year, third year, fourth year. And we developed that in partnership with XPD because they also have a similar checklist. And so essentially we just modified it a tad for what we thought was good for history students.
Wow. thank you so much, both of you. Not wrapping up everything yet, but gonna quickly transition, and at the very end, definitely want to open up the questions, conversations, all that good stuff. But thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom. So really the last bit I have is really framing this conversation and looking ahead, and I'm really excited to do kind of a soft launch for what was really a best practice in career services, career development. It's a program called Career Champions, or what we're naming XPD Champions, and all of you in this room are champions in your own way when it comes to championing career development. Because you're here and looking ahead, we are looking to continue this conversation in workshops, highlighting certainly ideas and things that are being currently done, and infusing resources, things that you can, in any capacity that you're working with students, whether you're a supervisor, whether you're in the classroom advising students, or can even be relevant to the coaches in the athletic department. Anyone who works with students, this is going to be relevant for. We're really excited to continue to build upon this in the future. And really, our main goals with this is to provide comprehensive career resources and training. There's so much information out there, and no one's an expert of career. Even my colleagues working in this field for many years, they'll say that they're not expert, and that's why partnership and collaboration is so important. And there's so many tools out there, and trying to have that one place to have a conversation on this, having that continuity and sharing. Two is to really empower faculty and staff, like I was mentioning, as career influencers. All of you work with students, all of you, and career is everywhere, and it really should be, because it has immense impact on many areas that I'm going to touch on next. But all of you, whether you're teaching, in your own fields, it's all connected, and students, when they get out of here, are doing great things with it. It's just a matter of communicating that with the goal to be, earlier and earlier, we like to think. And then lastly, integrating career development across academic and other spaces. Everything that students are involved in, our skills, they're things that inform them in terms of their interests, their career choices, their things that they want to explore, do, reflect, and connect. Those are the three big things, because really our why in XPD is that we see this connected certainly to graduation outcomes. Obviously that's a no-brainer. We want our graduates to have fulfilling careers going forward. And it's also connected to retention. Students see value in what they're learning, connecting it to career and their future. They're gonna stay here. I mean, obviously not the only part, but it's a big part. That the reason why students are here, whether they know it or not, is to look ahead to their careers. And then enrollment is also a piece. This all trickles down to enrollment too. If we can showcase that students are experiencing these things in the classroom, around campus, talking about career, talking about their futures, starting this conversation, starting their journey here, and looking at before they even get here, it will trickle down to prospective students. And then one of the last things is that this is really a starting point. It's something that certainly we do not want to do on our own. We want to go out and partner with around campus, with departments, with faculty, with staff. So this is truly a starting point to launch into something great across campus. And then lastly, definitely partner with us. It's been a huge theme of partnerships. We want to partner with you, me and my colleagues. Laura Hamlin in the back there, and Beth Nash, Erica Rademacher, please do reach out to us. We want to be part of this conversation, as certainly do not expect you to do it alone. We want to be part of that process. And yeah, that's really the last thing I have. Certainly want your feedback. If you have a device on you, a phone, certainly we'll send this out to, preferably be nice if you can take it now before you leave. And there's a bit.ly link too if you want to put the URL, but that is really all I have. Any questions or anything? Yeah,
So I'm curious in part because for those of us who work closely with students and try to keep an eye on them here as they're eyeing graduation, internships, jobs? This might be a question for XPD and for those who are partnering with the XPD to provide this for students. What would be your dream ideal of being able to embed this into the experience here for students? Because right now we all feel sort of a joint ownership of maybe admissions and enrollment, because it's like, no, that keeps the place running. But in reality, I mean, the student's success day one after graduation or trajectory 10 years after graduation is part of that success for here, and realistically, I mean, what we're trying to provide for students. Right now, it seems like it's above and beyond. The expectation of being involved in a student's success beyond the doors of the campus is above and beyond. How do we embed it as part of the culture that it's like, no, in the same way that we're trying to pull students here, we're also trying to make sure that when they leave, they are successful and that they have a pathway, or for that matter, even just a set of skills that make sure that they're heading in the right direction. And I mean, I was an English major. I know you all are talking too about the different humanities majors and things like that too, is being like, what are you going to do with this?
Yeah.
You have to have almost a set of strategies, a set of goals that happen here, rather than it just being like favor, make sure you know the etiquette, make sure you know the hidden curriculum side of it so that you can be successful. It might not be enough. Like, what would be your perfect situation or ideal situation?
There's a couple things. I mean, at baseline, having this conversation, having, empowering, faculty and staff to, feel confident in these conversations, and I've even referenced some of these tools, but outlining, the skills that they are, yes, having a referral to us is awesome, but when you're a supervisor or you're in an advising session with a student or in a classroom and you're able to say like, oh, this project connects to critical thinking or communication, or that's a real great baseline for that. Dream, I mean, there's a lot of really cool things that, other institutions are doing in terms of a career course. That'd be great in some capacity, or having some level of leadership or administration, like continuity across departments. There's different type of models and things like that, but trying to mandate some of these career development items with resumes and, connecting with alums and kind of scaffolding across students' 4 years, because I think Jonathan mentioned that the time sheet year rolls around, that's like, we want students to have these things underneath their belt, and right now, it's such a mismatch, especially with the students who need it most. If they're not getting it before their senior year, it's really trying to catch up in a lot of ways, and unfortunately that doesn't always happen. We're meeting with, we do meet with alums, and some of those alums have fell through the crack or whatever, and we love supporting them and try to mitigate, trying to get that sooner while they're here too. So
and they have to opt in. So I mean, like when you all are embedding it into your courses, that seems like the best possible way to catch the people who might need it most.
Yep. So the attendance, students need to show up for class. They get flagged, attendance is mostly taken. If they're not going to class, then what are they doing? And that's where having those assignments scaffolded in throughout, the each department's curriculum is it's incredibly valuable. Absolutely.
I appreciate what you all are doing.
Appreciate you being here.
It's hard to see students not feeling confident when they're heading out. I think it's nice to be able to send them job postings and job descriptions, send them toward Handshake, send them toward you all. But there's a point too where you'd hope that they'd get that while they were here. Structured.
It's an equity piece most of all, because some of the biggest things, just access, having students know, that we exist and that this is important. Obviously collaboration is so important, and certainly while they're here and while they get out of here, equity, like I mentioned, students that need it most are gonna, fall through the cracks, and we want them to feel like their education is, of value here, and all around is scalable too. It's a very scalable approach. We love meeting with students individually, and it's not sustainable either. You can't meet with every single student, nor it wouldn't be practical and be doable. So this is a way to help scale up, to say that everyone can talk about career in some capacity. Everyone can infuse, all staff and faculty can infuse, career competencies in their language, in their syllabi, in their supervision meetings, all those things, which again, I didn't really mention this, but this is very much alluding what we're hoping to do more in the future. other questions for either me or panelists? I think we're all out of time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Let's go up with